wanted to add something to what someone else earlier said. You know, because historically libraries have been short-staffed and underfunded. We had to always be looking at continuous improvement because we wanted to provide service. So consequently, what I'm seeing is that we're pretty adept at trying to do within what we've got, because we've gotten all of this experience where other departments are not able to do it as quickly. So I think it's kind of like a blessing in disguise, you know, for us in a way.
You know, I can assure you, other departments are being pressed, or they're being pressed harder than they have been in the past. You know, I think there's a growing awareness. You know, again, there is, as somebody mentioned, you know, the very real political tie-in between you know, effective labor unions, you know, particularly safety, and, you know, supporting council candidates. But I think it's hard to generalize about these things, but a growing recognition among city councils that, you know, not everything that's done in a police department or fire department is more important than anything that's done in the library or parks and recreation department. So, and you know, again, so much of this depends on the personalities and the willingness of the, you know, your leadership in the safety departments. Yes.
What are you seeing as far as outsourcing trends as you work with different jurisdictions?
Yeah, you know, that's been an interesting one. Personally, as a manager, I mean, clearly more cities are putting more things out to competitive bid, and I think what's happened, you know, with the compensation structure, you know, due largely by the pension system, but also, you know, if you track back over 20 years, the cost of living versus the cost of the salaries have gone up in, you know, cities and counties in California. You know, it's been greater than the cost of living. So I do think what's happened is that the cost spread between continuing to do something in-house versus contracting out has become too big to ignore. So I do see more cities doing that. You know, I mentioned we're working in Sacramento. Sacramento, you know, has a traditional parks and recreation department with the parks maintenance. January this year, they packaged 6 parks and put it out to bid for maintenance, and encouraged and facilitated the existing park maintenance division to put in their bid. You know, they got about 12 bids. I think the parks maintenance division was the second to the highest and was 3 times the cost of those firms that had good track records. And, you know, and this is, Sacramento has a living wage ordinance and things like that, so it's not, we're going to pick people up at Home Depot to maintain park. But, you know, so that was a pretty stark comparison, and you can't ignore that as a manager. So, and I guess from some extent, it's you know, that's one of the changes that I've seen. You know, 20 years ago, I think I was able to sit down with any group of municipal employees and say, there's no reason why we can't be competitive with the private sector. We don't pay taxes, we don't have to make a profit, we should be competitive. I can't say that anymore because I think the cost structure has gotten so out of whack. So I think inevitably you're gonna see more contracting.
In this county, I'm sure it's happening where some of the cities had already contracted with sheriff's department to provide their police and with the fire district to provide that. And more cities are now in conversation to hand off the entire operation. Yeah. And they just have to divest, they just cannot afford it.
Yeah. Integration, you know, getting departments together.
Doesn't mean the county takes out all the costs, there's some costs.
Anything else? Great. Well, yeah, thank you very much.
Well, I was reflecting what Arne was saying about the nature of collaboration and partnerships really requiring compromise. And my whole career has actually kind of focused on interlibrary things. My very first job out of library school, I was a project manager for a PLS project. and then worked for the organization most of you probably never heard of called CLASS, one of the few JPA organizations to ever go out of business, or as a year and a half to manage a statewide online reference program where I negotiated reference contracts for databases statewide for all the class members. And then, you know, over the years, ended up at San Jose, where the joint library at the university is, you know, a pretty outstanding type of interlibrary cooperation. And I think the biggest piece of information I would pass on to you is kind of what he said, but I'd say it a little differently. That in any kind of partnership, you will lose some autonomy and you will gain some benefits. And that maybe it's all humans, but certainly all librarians, overvalue the autonomy when they start thinking about this, and very, very seriously undervalue what they will get and their users will get through the partnership. So when I was working at Redwood City, one of the, you know, where in PLS all of the libraries share one ILS, and I calculated, because I'm kind of a calculator kind of person, that that it cost Redwood City about half what it would have cost us to have our own standalone system. And then furthermore, Redwood City, a city of 70,000 people with a limited collection, all of its library users, because of that shared system, had access to the combined collection of a community of about 750,000. And the huge benefit to the users then of being able to have access to vast numbers of resources at less cost than it would have been for us to have our very own system. And it sometimes puzzles me why we haven't kind of figured that out. So my urge to you would be, as you begin to think about some of these things, set aside some of your fears about autonomy. We are grown-ups. We should be able to fight for the things that we need in a partnership, as opposed to saying, well, I just gave it all away and somehow, you know, or he might take it all from me, as opposed to me saying, get over it, you're not going to get it. So I think that that's part of the approach we have to take, is to say, you know, if you sit down and do a list of pros and cons, strike out most of your cons, and say, we have to take these risks, we have to go and do it, and then we have to be willing to just kind of fight it out and work it out. And the other piece in any kind of partnership is, to some degree, you have to commit yourself to the goals of that partnership. And that means you may modify your own goals. And that's part of giving up the autonomy, as you say, you know, if we want PLP to thrive, then I have to make a commitment to help it thrive. And sometimes to say, well, I thought this would happen and I would get this, but can I live with this other thing happening? So when I was at class, you guys can tell, for the price of a drink, I'll tell any of you, we had a lot of fun at class on Friday afternoons. We'd go out for drinks and come up with these cynical rules of library collaboration. I will collaborate with you if I get more than you do. I will collaborate with you if a third party pays for it. We had a whole list of them. Every Friday we try to come up with a new one. But I urge us all to kind of set aside, you know, think about the frustrations that people come up with those kinds of cynical rules, and say, let's change those cynical rules and say, you know, we really don't have a lot of choice. We have many, many long relationships and patterns. The actual differences between most of us are not so great as we imagine. The difference between our communities, the difference among our collections, you know, we way overvalue how unique and how different San Bruno is from Los Gatos. So, you know, I just think that would be my one piece of advice to all of us, is to really set aside that fear of loss of autonomy and say, I'll deal with those consequences, but I'm going to grab the opportunity to get all those benefits. So with that, we're going to take about a 10-minute break. We'll come back and do the plan of service before lunch.